You were always just a stepping stone, Sarah. That's what he said. Right before he slammed the door and left my apartment for the last time. I stood there, my hands still shaking from the argument, the sound of that door slam echoing in my chest like a gunshot. My brain couldn't even process what he'd just said. A stepping stone. The man I had loved for 6 years, the man I helped when he couldn't pay rent, when he was playing gigs for $50 at a local bar, had just told me I was nothing more than a temporary rung on his ladder to fame. That was the night something inside me cracked. Not just my heart. My sense of who I was. I remember standing there in silence, the city lights flickering outside my window, the hum of traffic like white noise while my whole world went still. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my best friend, Melissa. Did he leave again? I didn't even reply. I just stared at his last message on my phone. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You knew what this was. I don't know how long I stood there, reading it again and again, like if I stared long enough it would make sense. But it didn't. Nothing did. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch till sunrise, knees pulled to my chest, replaying every moment of our relationship, from the first time I saw him play in that tiny bar on 4th Street, to the night he begged me to move in with him because you're the only one who believes in me. And I did. God, I did. He wasn't famous back then. Not even close. He was just Jake, messy, broke, endlessly charming Jake with a guitar and a dream. I used to believe in him more than he believed in himself. I drove him to auditions, proofread his emails, even used my savings to buy him better recording equipment. When he couldn't afford to record an EP, I sold my old car. He promised he'd pay me back one day. When I make it big, he'd say with that grin that melted every ounce of logic I had left. I didn't care about the money. I cared about him. And that was my first mistake. Because Jake didn't just want success. He needed it. It was like oxygen to him. And when things finally started happening, when his song went viral, when people started recognizing him at coffee shops, something changed. He changed. He started canceling our dates. Spending nights at the studio. He'd come home at 2 a.m. smelling like whiskey and perfume I didn't wear. When I asked, he'd laugh and say, "You're overthinking it. This is what comes with the industry." The industry. That became his excuse for everything. The lies, the distance, the coldness. But the truth is, fame didn't ruin Jake. It just revealed who he really was. The night he left for good, I begged him to at least be honest. I remember my voice trembling as I said, "Just tell me the truth, Jake. Do you still love me?" He didn't even hesitate. He smirked. "Love doesn't pay the bills, Sarah. Ambition does." And that's when he said it, that line that still echoes sometimes when I try to sleep. You were always just a stepping stone. Then he picked up his guitar, slung his jacket over his shoulder, and walked out like I was a forgotten lyric. I didn't cry right away. I think my brain just froze. It wasn't until I walked into the kitchen and saw the empty space where his coffee mug used to sit that it hit me. That ugly, hollow kind of crying that makes your whole body shake. The months after that were a blur. Everywhere I looked, Jake was there, not in person, but on screens. Music videos. Interviews. His face plastered across social media with captions like, "The next big thing." It felt like the whole world was cheering for the man who broke me. People would ask me, "Aren't you happy for him?" And I'd smile and lie. Of course, because what else could I say? That every time I heard his voice on the radio, it felt like my ribs were closing in. Melissa tried to pull me out of it. She made me get off social media, dragged me to yoga classes, even signed me up for a cooking course. I tried to move on, I really did, but you can't heal from a wound that keeps getting broadcast on national TV. For a while, I convinced myself that was it. He got his fame. I got my silence. We were done. Until the night he came back. It was almost a year later. I was in my apartment, halfway through a glass of red wine, watching some mindless Netflix show when I heard a knock on the door. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't expecting anyone. But the knocking got louder. When I opened it, I swear my heart stopped. Jake stood there. Same leather jacket. Same half smile. But he looked older. Tired. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. The city noise faded behind him, and I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then he said quietly, "Hey, Sarah, can we talk?" My hand was still on the doorknob. I didn't move. Because I couldn't decide what was worse, the fact that he was standing there like nothing had happened, or the fact that a part of me still wanted to know why. And that's when I realized fame might have taken him away from me, but somehow it had also brought him back to my door. And I had no idea why. He looked nervous. I'd never seen Jake nervous before. Not even when he performed in front of thousands for the first time. But now, standing at my doorstep with his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, his confidence was gone. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him. Part of me wanted to slam the door the way he did to me. But another part, the part one hated, wanted to hear what he had to say. 5 minutes, he said softly. Just 5. I don't know why, but I stepped aside. Maybe curiosity. Maybe closure. Or maybe that tiny piece of me that hadn't stopped loving him. He walked in slowly, like he didn't recognize the place anymore. I'd changed a few things. Different curtains, new couch, no pictures on the wall, but the air still carried something familiar. He glanced at the table where I'd set down my wine glass, then looked at me. "You stopped drinking white," he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. "Wow, you remember that." He gave a faint smile. "I remember everything." That line almost broke me, but I kept my arms crossed. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. He sat on the edge of the couch, tapping his fingers on his knees like he was searching for the right words. I didn't sit. I wanted him to feel the distance, the same distance he'd created when he left. "I messed up, Sarah," he finally said. I laughed, bitterly. That's one way to put it. He ran a hand through his hair. I was stupid. I thought fame would fix everything. That once I made it, I'd finally feel like I mattered. But it didn't work out that way. "Poor you," I said quietly. "You got everything you wanted, and you're still miserable." He looked up sharply. "You think I don't know what I lost?" I didn't answer. My silence was louder than any argument. He leaned forward. "Do you have any idea what it's like when everyone wants a piece of you, but no one actually knows you? When every friendship comes with a contract, and every compliment sounds like a negotiation." I stayed quiet, but something in his tone caught me off guard. There was pain there, real pain. He exhaled. I thought I could handle it. The parties, the pressure, the fake smiles. But when the spotlight fades, you realize who's really left. And for me, that was no one. "Not even her?" I asked. His eyes flickered. "Who?" "Don't play dumb, Jake. The girl from the music video. The one you started showing up with everywhere right after you walked out of here." He swallowed. "That wasn't a what you think." I shook my head. "Don't insult me. You don't get to rewrite history just because you regret it now." He looked down, shame washing over his face. "I didn't love her," he whispered. "I loved what she represented. She was fame. The crowd. The escape. But she didn't care about me, not really." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "So what are you doing here, Jake? Looking for sympathy? Or are you out of women to use?" He winced. "I deserve that." "Yeah," I said flatly, "you do." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the fridge and the faint noise of rain outside. Then he said something that almost made me pity him. "I got dropped by my label last month." That stunned me. "What?" He nodded. "Turns out fame doesn't last long when you start saying no. They wanted control, what to wear, what to post, who to date. When I pushed back, they froze me out." He gave a hollow laugh. "Guess I'm not as marketable without a scandal." I stared at him. The confident, larger-than-life Jake I once knew was gone. What sat before me was just a man, broken, tired, and lost. And for a second, I almost forgot how much he'd hurt me. Almost. "You know," I said softly, "you once told me love doesn't pay the bills." He looked up, eyes heavy. "Well," I continued, "how's that working out for you?" He didn't reply. He just nodded slowly, like he couldn't argue with the truth. I turned toward the door, my voice calm but cold. "Jake, you got what you wanted. You walked over everyone to get there, including me. So whatever's happening to you now, it's not my problem." He stood up, desperation flashing across his face. "Sarah, please." I'm not here to ask for anything. I just needed to see you. To tell you I'm sorry. I froze. Not because of the apology, but because, for once, it sounded like he meant it. Still, I couldn't let myself fall back into that trap. You're a little late, I said. Apologies don't undo the damage. He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. I know. As he walked out, the rain poured harder. He stopped at the doorway, looked back, and said, You were never a stepping stone, Sarah. You were the only thing real. Then he left. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at the door, realizing that maybe this was the closure I'd been waiting for. But deep down, I had a strange feeling. Something told me this wasn't the last time I'd see him. Not by a long shot. 4 days after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time I tried to distract myself, cleaning the apartment, scrolling social media, cooking dinner, it didn't matter. Jake's face would sneak back into my mind like a ghost that refused to leave. I hated it. I hated that even after everything, some part of me still cared. But when you've loved someone that deeply, you don't just shut it off like a switch. It lingers in your memories, your routines, even your music playlists. Melissa noticed it, of course. She always did. You've been quiet, she said one evening over dinner. Let me guess, Jake? I sighed. He showed up last week. Her fork froze midair. You're kidding. What did he want? Closure, I guess. Or maybe forgiveness. I don't know. She rolled her eyes. Please. Guys like him only come back when their ego's bruised. I wanted to agree with her, but I couldn't shake the look on his face, that mix of regret and exhaustion. It wasn't an act. Not this time. He's not doing well, I said softly. Melissa leaned forward. And that's your problem because... I smiled weakly. It's not. But even as I said it, I didn't sound convinced. 2 weeks passed. No texts. No calls. Just silence. Part of me was relieved. The other part wondered if he was okay. I even caught myself searching his name online once or twice. His fan pages were quiet. His last Instagram post was over a month old. Rumors were floating around. Canceled shows, a fallout with his management, something about rehab. Rehab. I wanted to believe that was gossip. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Then one night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hey, it's Jake. I didn't know if you'd blocked me. I just wanted to say, thank you. For hearing me out. That was it. No begging, no drama. Just that one message. I stared at it for a long time before typing back. Take care of yourself. It felt like the end. But a week later, I saw him again, completely by accident. It was a Friday night. Melissa and I were at a small charity event downtown. Local artists, live music, food trucks. The kind of thing I loved before everything fell apart. The crowd was buzzing when the host announced a surprise guest performer. Please welcome, Jake Rivers. My stomach dropped. Melissa looked at me instantly. Oh my God. I froze. My wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. He walked onto the small stage. No flashy lights, no entourage. Just him, a guitar, and a quiet smile. He looked different. The arrogance was gone. His hair was a little longer, his clothes simple. He adjusted the mic and said, This song is for someone I hurt more than anyone else. The crowd went silent. Then he started to play. The song wasn't one of his old hits. It was new. Raw. About love and loss and realizing too late what matters most. The lyrics hit me like a wave. You built me when I had nothing / and I repaid you with goodbye. Now I see your shadow in the spotlight / and I wish I'd never let you cry. By the second verse, my throat tightened. I looked away, but I could feel Melissa's eyes on me. When he finished, the crowd erupted in applause. But Jake didn't smile. He just looked out into the audience and found me. For a moment, it felt like everyone else disappeared. Just him and me, connected by a silence that said everything words couldn't. Then he stepped off the stage and disappeared backstage before I could move. Melissa grabbed my arm. You're not going back there. But I already was. Backstage, the air smelled like sweat and dust. A few people moved around, packing up equipment. Then I saw him, wiping his face with a towel, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. When he noticed me, his eyes widened slightly. "You came." I folded my arms. "You didn't exactly give me a heads up." He smiled faintly. "Would you have come if I did?" I hesitated. "Probably not." He nodded, understanding. "I just needed to sing it. I wasn't trying to make a scene." "You wrote that about me," I said quietly. He looked at me for a long moment. "Yeah, every word." Something in me cracked a little. The anger, the resentment. It didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. Still, I kept my tone firm. "Jake, songs don't erase the past." "I know," he said, "but they can start to make sense of it." He stepped closer, cautious, like he was afraid I'd disappear. "I'm trying to fix my life, Sarah. I'm in therapy. I'm sober. And I'm not asking you for anything. Not forgiveness, not another chance. I just wanted to own what I did." I searched his face, looking for the lie. But there wasn't one. He meant it. I took a deep breath. "I don't know what to say to that." He gave a sad smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just keep living your life. That's all the payback I deserve." Then he walked past me, out into the cool night air. I didn't stop him. I just stood there, heart pounding, realizing something I never thought I would. He wasn't the same Jake anymore. And maybe I wasn't the same Sarah either. After that night, everything felt different, not just about Jake, but about me. It was like seeing him on that stage, stripped of the arrogance and spotlight, had shifted something I didn't even know was still broken. For the first time, I didn't feel small when I thought about him. I didn't feel angry, or bitter, or worthless. I just felt free. Still, freedom doesn't mean clarity. I didn't know what to do next. Should I talk to him again? Keep my distance? Pretend it never happened? Melissa, as always, had her opinion ready. "You need to cut this off for good," she said as soon as I told her. "He had his moment. Don't let him drag you back into the past." "I'm not going back," I said. "It's just, he's different now." She snorted. "They're always different when the world stops clapping." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. She had a point. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Jake standing there, vulnerable and real, singing those words like he was bleeding through every line. Something in me wanted to know if that version of him was real, or just another act. A few days later, I found out. I was coming out of a cafe downtown when I saw him again, completely by accident. He was sitting alone at an outdoor table, hood up, scribbling in a small notebook. No cameras. No fans. Just Jake and his coffee. I could have walked away. Honestly, I should have. But before I could talk myself out of it, I walked over. He looked up, startled, then smiled a little. "Hey." "Hey," I said. "Do you mind if I sit?" He shook his head. "Not at all." For a moment, it was awkward, like we were two strangers meeting for the first time. Then, slowly, the silence started to feel normal. He closed his notebook. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I didn't either," I said. "Guess life has a sense of humor." He chuckled softly. "Yeah. A cruel one sometimes." We talked for an hour. About normal things, music, food, the city, mutual friends. Not once did we bring up the past. It was surprisingly easy. But when I stood up to leave, he looked at me and said something that stayed with me for days. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I know I don't deserve it, but talking to you feels like breathing again." I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled faintly and said, "Take care, Jake," and walked away. The next few weeks were a blur of small, strange coincidences. I'd bumped into him at the grocery store, at the park, once even at a bookstore where he was sitting on the floor reading a poetry collection I loved. It felt too frequent to be random, but every time he'd smile, say hi, and never push for more. Eventually, I stopped believing it was fate. It was just two people living in the same city, crossing paths after years of being apart. Except, it didn't feel like that. It felt like something was pulling us toward each other again. One evening, he texted me. "Hey, don't freak out, but I just got asked to play a small acoustic show for a recovery fundraiser next weekend. Thought I'd tell you because, well, you're part of why I'm still standing." That line hit me harder than I expected. I typed a reply 3 times before sending the simplest version. That's good, Jake. I'm proud of you. He didn't reply right away, but when he did, it was just one word. Thanks. The night of the fundraiser, I told myself I wasn't going. I even put on pajamas and opened a bottle of wine. But around 8 p.m., something in me shifted. I got dressed, grabbed a jacket, and drove downtown. The event was small, maybe 50 people. The lights were dim, the room smelled like coffee and candles, and the stage was just a rug with a mic stand. Jake was already there, tuning his guitar. When he saw me, his eyes softened. He didn't say anything, but his smile said enough. He played 3 songs. None about fame, or heartbreak, or bitterness. Just quiet songs about healing. About rebuilding yourself when the world's applause stops. For the first time, I realized his journey mirrored mine. We'd both been broken by what we thought we wanted, and maybe we were both still learning how to live without it. After the show, people came up to thank him. I waited until the crowd thinned, then walked up and said, "You did good." He looked up, surprised, and smiled. "You came. I told you. I'm proud of you." He hesitated, then said softly, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you think people like us ever really move on? Or do we just learn to live with the ghosts?" I paused. "Maybe both." He nodded. "Yeah, maybe both." That night, when I got home, I didn't feel confused anymore. I knew I wasn't in love with Jake. Not the way I used to be. But I cared. Not because of what we were, but because of what we'd survived. Sometimes closure doesn't come with an ending. Sometimes it comes with understanding. And maybe that was enough. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. Not the dramatic kind that comes after a grand goodbye, but the quiet kind, the kind that feels like a deep breath after years of holding it in. Jake was part of my story, but he wasn't the whole story anymore. I had a new job, new friends, a new rhythm to my days. I even started writing again, something I hadn't done since before he left. Little essays, reflections, nothing big. But it felt like rediscovering an old part of myself I'd buried under someone else's dreams. Still, he lingered in the background of my life. Not like a shadow anymore, but like a name you sometimes hear in passing and no longer flinch at. Until one morning, everything shifted again. It was a Tuesday. I was half awake, sipping coffee, scrolling through emails when a headline caught my eye. Jake Rivers hospitalized after overdose scare. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. My heart dropped so fast it made me dizzy. I didn't even finish reading the article before I grabbed my keys and ran out the door. By the time I got to the hospital, reporters were already outside. The lobby buzzed with whispers and camera flashes. I gave his name at the desk, expecting to be turned away, but the nurse just nodded and said, "Room 304. He asked for you." Those words stopped me cold. He asked for me. When I walked into his room, I barely recognized him. Jake looked pale, fragile, tubes in his arm, monitors beeping softly beside him. His eyes were half open, unfocused, but when he saw me, he smiled weakly. "Hey, Sarah." My throat tightened. "Hey." I pulled up a chair, trying to hold it together. "You scared me half to death." He laughed faintly. "Guess I'm still good at making headlines." I wanted to be angry, to ask why, to remind him of all the people who cared, but all I could do was sit there and hold his hand. It was cold, trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "It wasn't on purpose. I slipped. One bad night." I nodded, swallowing hard. "You don't have to explain." "I do," he said. "Because you're the only one who ever saw me before all this mess. The only one who actually knew me." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. He looked at me, eyes glassy. "I thought I could handle everything. But fame's like a storm. It doesn't stop just because you're tired. And when the people cheering start to fade, it gets really, really quiet." I squeezed his hand. "You're still here, Jake. That counts for something." He smiled weakly. "Yeah. Thanks to you showing up again." He stayed in the hospital for a week. Every day I visited. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. We'd just sit there, watching old shows, laughing at how ridiculous we used to be. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't nostalgic. It was human. Melissa wasn't thrilled when she found out. "You can't keep playing nurse," she said bluntly over the phone. "He's your past, not your project." "I know," I told her. "I'm not saving him. I just don't want him to feel alone." She sighed. "You always had the biggest heart. Just make sure it doesn't get broken again." I promised I wouldn't. And for once, I meant it. When Jake finally got discharged, he looked healthier. Still fragile, but clearer. He was staying with his sister for a while, somewhere quiet, outside the city. Before he left, we sat together in the hospital courtyard. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. He turned to me. "You know, I used to think love was about needing someone. About holding on so tight you never lose them. And now," I asked. "Now I think it's about letting someone see you, really see you, and still not running away." I smiled. "That's growth." He laughed softly. "Guess therapy's paying off." We sat in silence for a moment before he said, "I want to make things right, Sarah. Not with you, not romantically, but with life. I'm done chasing applause. I just want peace." I nodded. "Then go find it." He looked at me with that same warmth I'd fallen for years ago, only this time it didn't hurt. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on me when everyone else did." "I didn't do it for you," I said gently. "I did it because I needed to know I could care for someone and still walk away whole." He smiled. Then maybe we both found what we were looking for. When he left, I watched his car disappear down the road. I thought I'd feel empty, but I didn't. I felt closure, not the movie kind with big music and perfect timing, but the real kind. The kind that comes from knowing you gave what you could, took what you needed, and let the rest go. That night, I finally slept without dreaming about him. And for the first time since that awful door slam years ago, I woke up happy. 6 months passed before I saw him again. Not in person this time, on TV. I was folding laundry, half listening to the morning show, when I heard the host say his name. Jake Rivers opens up about recovery and redemption in his first public interview since leaving the spotlight. I froze, shirt in hand, staring at the screen. He looked healthy, clear-eyed, calm. The host asked about his overdose, the pressure, the crash. He didn't dodge a single question. "I lost myself," he said simply. "And I hurt good people along the way. But I'm learning to forgive myself too." Then the host smiled and said, "There's one person your fans are curious about. Sarah, the one who inspired your song." He hesitated, just for a moment. Then he smiled, that soft, quiet smile I remembered. "She's the reason I'm still here," he said. "Not because she saved me, but because she reminded me what real love looks like. I don't deserve her forgiveness, but I'm grateful she gave me peace." I stood there in my living room, hands trembling, eyes burning, not because I missed him, but because I finally believed him. That interview changed something. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about him reclaiming his life, and me realizing I'd already reclaimed mine. I'd spent years being the girl he left behind, the one he used, the one he broke. But now, when people mentioned his name, it didn't sting. It just existed. Like a song you used to love that doesn't hurt anymore. Still, when my phone started buzzing with texts that day, from Melissa, from old friends, from people who knew about our history, all saying, "He talked about you on TV." I felt that familiar weight of attention I never wanted. Melissa even called me, laughing. "Congratulations, you're officially the muse of the decade." "Yeah, just what I always wanted," I said dryly. But deep down, I knew something was coming. Fame had a way of circling back, even when you thought you'd outrun it. A week later, I got an email. The subject line read, "Documentary Inquiry, Jake Rivers Story, Interview Request for Sarah James." I stared at it for a long time. The message was polite. They were producing a Netflix-style documentary about Jake's rise, fall, and recovery, a story of redemption. They wanted to capture multiple perspectives, including the woman who helped shape his journey. I didn't reply right away. Melissa said, "You should do it. Tell your side." But I wasn't sure I wanted to relive any of it. For 2 nights, I drafted replies and deleted them. On the 3rd night, I finally wrote back. Thank you for the invitation, but I'm not interested in participating. I wish Jake the best in his recovery. I hit send and felt lighter immediately. Because for once, I wasn't reacting to Jake. I was choosing for me. 2 months later, the documentary premiered. I didn't plan on watching it, but curiosity won. One quiet evening, I made tea, curled up on the couch, and pressed play. The first half was what I expected. The concerts, the parties, the press. The fast climb and the faster crash. But halfway through, my breath caught. There was a clip of him sitting by a lake, guitar in hand, saying, "Fame made me forget who I was. But losing Sarah reminded me who I wanted to be." Then came the song. The one he wrote at that charity show. I didn't cry this time. I just smiled. It was strange, watching our story told to millions, knowing none of them would ever really understand the private moments, the nights, the silence. But that was okay. That story wasn't mine anymore. Mine had moved on. After that, things quieted down. Jake's name faded from the tabloids. He started working with youth recovery programs. He even opened a small studio that offered free recording sessions to struggling artists. Every now and then, I'd get a message from him, short, simple check-ins. "Hope you're doing okay. Heard you started a blog. That's amazing. Still grateful for you, always." And sometimes I'd reply. Sometimes I wouldn't. Because I'd learned that healing doesn't always mean staying connected. Sometimes it just means not carrying the weight anymore. One night, months later, I got another knock at my door. I opened it, expecting Melissa. But there he was again. Jake. This time, though, he wasn't broken or desperate. He looked steady, calm. He was holding something, a small brown envelope. "Hey," he said softly. I smiled, a little surprised. "Hey, you indoors, huh?" He laughed. "Yeah, I guess it's kind of our thing." He handed me the envelope. "This isn't some grand gesture. Just something I wanted you to have." Inside was a single Polaroid, the one we took years ago at his first gig. We were both laughing, our faces flushed, our hands messy with marker ink from writing lyrics on napkins. On the back, he'd written, "You believed before anyone else did. Thank you for being my first home." When I looked up, he smiled. "I'm leaving the city next week. Thought it'd be right to say goodbye properly this time." I nodded. "Goodbye, Jake." He paused, eyes soft. "Goodbye, Sarah." And this time when he walked away, I didn't feel broken. I felt complete. When the door closed behind him that night, it didn't echo the way it used to. No heavy silence. No heartbreak humming through the walls. Just peace. I stood there for a moment, the Polaroid still in my hand, tracing the edges with my thumb. We looked so young in that photo, like two people who had no idea how complicated life was about to get. There was something pure about that memory. It wasn't about fame or fear or mistakes. It was just us. Two dreamers who thought love could carry everything. I slipped the photo into a drawer instead of throwing it away. Not because I couldn't let go, but because some memories deserve to stay, not as wounds, but as proof of how far you've come. After that night, I didn't hear from Jake again. And honestly, I didn't expect to. He'd said his real goodbye, the kind that didn't need another explanation. The kind that finally closed the chapter. A few weeks later, life felt strangely normal again. I was back to teaching my creative writing class at the community center, mentoring people who wanted to tell their stories. It was funny. Hearing them talk about heartbreak, failure, and hope reminded me how universal it all was. Everyone had their version of Jake. One of my students, a shy woman named Natalie, shared a line during a writing exercise that hit me like lightning. She said, "Maybe forgiveness isn't about saying it was okay. Maybe it's just about saying it no longer controls you." That night, those words looped in my head until I finally sat down at my desk and started writing. Not about Jake exactly, but about the idea of redemption without reunion. It turned into an essay I called, "When the Door Finally Stays Closed." I didn't think much of it. I posted it on my little blog like I did with everything else. But by the next morning, it had exploded. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments. People from all over the world writing things like, "I needed this today. This helped me finally move on. Thank you for putting into words what I couldn't." I wasn't used to that kind of attention. But this time it didn't scare me, because it wasn't fame built on someone else's pain. It was connection built on truth. A week later, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hi, is this Sarah James? Yes, who's this? This is Amy from the Everyday Voice podcast. We came across your essay, and we'd love to have you on to talk about healing and letting go. I laughed nervously. You're sure you have the right person? I'm not exactly an influencer. She chuckled. That's why people will listen. You sound real. After thinking about it for a day, I said yes. It wasn't for attention. It was for me. For closure that wasn't about Jake, but about owning my story. The whole story. The podcast went live a week later. We recorded in a cozy studio. Nothing fancy. The host asked about the essay, about the meaning behind the title, and then she asked, was it inspired by someone? I hesitated, then said, yes, someone I loved once. He taught me a lot, mostly what love shouldn't cost. The host smiled softly. Do you think he's heard it? I don't know, I said. But I hope he has. Because I think he'd understand it now. When the episode aired, the response was overwhelming again. Not because people were gossiping about who Jake was. Most didn't even connect it to him. But because the story resonated. People related to it, felt seen by it. And for the first time, I realized something huge. I wasn't the girl in his story anymore. He was a chapter in mine. Months passed, and life kept moving in the quiet, steady way it does after the storm. I started teaching full-time. The blog turned into a small book deal, a collection of essays about love, loss, and letting go. I called it Unfamous, because that's what I wanted, a life that didn't depend on being seen, only on being real. When the book was published, I mailed a signed copy to one person. No note. No message. Just the book. Jake. A month later, I got a postcard back. A simple photo of a cabin by a lake. On the back, he'd written, read it. You found peace, Sarah. I'm proud of you. And I found mine too. That was the last time we ever spoke. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever cross paths again. Maybe years from now, at a coffee shop or some random airport. Maybe we'll smile. Maybe we'll talk. Maybe we won't. But it won't matter. Because we already met where it truly counts, in the space between forgiveness and freedom. He walked away for fame, and fame eventually led him back. But I didn't need his return to feel whole. I found wholeness the moment I stopped waiting for an apology and started living my own story. And maybe that was the real ending all along. The months after my book release felt surreal. Bookstores emailed to restock copies. Podcasts and small radio shows reached out. I got letters, real handwritten letters, from readers who said my words helped them finally let go of something or someone. And even though it wasn't fame in the glittering Jake-style sense, it felt far more meaningful. This kind of attention wasn't shallow or loud. It was quietly human. People didn't see me as someone attached to a celebrity. They saw me as someone who survived. Melissa teased me constantly. Look at you, best-selling author, she'd say, waving her phone with some new article about me. I'd roll my eyes. Hardly best-selling. Okay, fine, emotionally best-selling then. We laughed, but she was proud. She'd seen me at my lowest, curled on the couch, eyes swollen, convinced I'd never feel whole again. Watching me now, smiling grounded, she said one night, you know what I love most? You didn't turn bitter. And I smiled back. Because bitterness means they still own part of you. I sold that part back to peace. It had been nearly a year since I'd last heard from Jake when an email popped into my inbox. Subject, a favor and a thank you. It was from him. I hovered over it for a long time before opening it. Hey, Sarah. I hope you're doing well. Actually, I know you are. I bought your book. I read every page. You've become everything you used to tell me you'd be. The words hit me hard, especially the parts about forgiveness. You were right. Redemption doesn't need an audience. I'm organizing a benefit concert next month for recovery programs. The theme is starting over. I was wondering if you'd consider reading a short piece from your book on stage. Just one chapter. No cameras, no press. Just the people who need to hear it most. It would mean a lot. Either way, thank you for everything. Not for the past, but for helping me build a better now. Jake. My first reaction was no. Absolutely not. Then I reread the line, no cameras, no press. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a real request from one broken person trying to do something good. Still, I didn't reply immediately. I thought about it for days. I walked along the river, journaled, talked to Melissa. Would it reopen wounds? She asked gently. Maybe, I said. But sometimes you have to walk back through the fire to prove it doesn't burn anymore. So I said yes. The concert was held at a small community hall just outside the city. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs and string lights. The crowd wasn't glamorous. It was people who were fighting their way back from rock bottom. Recovering addicts, former artists, lonely souls trying to start over. When I walked in, Jake was on stage doing a quick sound check. He spotted me immediately and smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't try to impress anymore. Hey, he said softly when I reached the stage. Hey, I replied. You sure about this? Yeah, I said. I think I am. He nodded. Then thank you. For everything. When it was my turn to speak, the lights dimmed slightly. I looked out at the audience. Tired faces, hopeful eyes. I opened my book to the chapter titled, You Can Heal Without an Apology. I read slowly, carefully. Some people leave not because you did anything wrong, but because they're not ready to love without breaking things. And when they come back, sometimes they're ready, sometimes they're not. But you don't owe them your undoing twice. The room was silent. I could hear people breathing. One woman wiped her eyes. When I finished, they clapped, not loudly, but long enough that it felt like a soft wave of understanding passing through the room. Jake walked up next and played a song I'd never heard before. It wasn't about loss this time. It was about rebuilding, about waking up one morning and realizing you made it out alive. He sang like a man who wasn't performing anymore. Just living. After the show, as people were leaving, he came up to me. You were amazing, he said. So were you, I replied. He smiled, glancing at the small crowd lingering near the exit. It feels good to do something real again. No fame, no noise. Just purpose. I nodded. That's what redemption sounds like. He laughed quietly. You always did know how to phrase things better than me. For a moment, we just stood there, side by side, not needing to fill the silence. Then he said, You know, Sarah, if you ever write another book, maybe call it after the applause. Seems fitting. I grinned. Maybe I will. That night, driving home, I rolled the window down and let the wind rush in. It didn't feel like closure anymore. Closure sounded final, and this wasn't that. This was peace, the kind that lets you remember without pain. He walked away for fame. Fame destroyed him. But maybe it also rebuilt him into someone capable of doing good. And me? It taught me that sometimes the worst heartbreak leads you exactly where you were meant to be. A few weeks after the benefit concert, I got a small package in the mail. No return address, just my name written in Jake's familiar handwriting. Inside was a flash drive and a short note. Sarah, this isn't for release or publicity. It's just something I made for myself, and for you, if you ever want to listen. Track 7 is the one that says everything I never managed to in words. Thank you for giving me back the part of me that fame tried to erase. Jake. I didn't open it right away. It sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days, catching the sunlight every morning, daring me to feel something. Finally, one evening after dinner, I plugged it into my laptop. There were 7 tracks. Acoustic demos. No production, no edits. Just Jake and his guitar. The first 6 were what I expected. Soft melodies about forgiveness, peace, letting go. But track 7, that one stopped me cold. It started with a quiet recording of waves. Then his voice, lower, calmer, more honest than I'd ever heard. If I could go back, I'd tell her I didn't leave because she wasn't enough. I left because I wasn't. And I'd tell her that fame doesn't fill you, it empties you. And when you finally crawl out of it, you start missing the simplest things, like the sound of her humming in the kitchen, or the way she said my name like it wasn't attached to a brand. My eyes blurred halfway through. So this is for her, the girl who believed in me before the world did. And for anyone listening, don't let the noise make you forget what quiet love sounds like. By the time the song ended, I was crying. But not the way I used to, not broken, not bitter. Just grateful. grateful that something once painful had turned into something beautiful. The next morning, I emailed him a short message. Track 7 was beautiful. Thank you for letting me hear it. He replied a few hours later. Thank you for being the reason I could write it. That was it. No flirting, no nostalgia, no what if. Just mutual respect, sealed in a simple exchange that said everything words didn't need to. And that's when I realized, this really was the end. The right kind of end, the kind that doesn't sting. Life went on. My book tour picked up in small cities. I started giving talks at universities about storytelling and emotional resilience. Every time someone asked how I found my voice, I'd smile and say, by losing everything that made me doubt it. At one of those talks, a young woman came up to me afterward. I wanted to thank you, she said, voice trembling. Your chapter about not chasing closure saved me. I was waiting for my ex to apologize for 2 years. Then I realized I didn't need him to. I hugged her. That's the moment you start healing, when you stop waiting for permission to move on. As I watched her walk away, I thought about how strange it was, the way pain recycles into purpose if you let it. Jake once told me fame was about being seen by everyone. I'd learned real fulfillment was being understood by even one person. One night, while traveling for a reading, I found myself sitting in a quiet hotel room scrolling through news headlines when I saw a photo of him. Jake Rivers to Open Youth Music Foundation. The caption read, after years of battling addiction and disillusionment, former chart topper Jake Rivers launches a nonprofit for aspiring musicians struggling with mental health and substance abuse. I smiled. There he was, finally using his voice for something real. The fame he once chased now served others. I closed my laptop and whispered to myself, good for you, Jake. It didn't ache anymore. It didn't even surprise me. It just made sense. Because some stories don't end in reunion, they end in redemption. 2 months later, I received an invitation in the mail. The Riverlight Foundation Grand Opening Gala. At the bottom, written in his handwriting. No pressure. Just an open seat if you ever want to see what you helped build. I stared at it for a while. I wasn't sure if I'd go, but I kept it pinned to my fridge anyway. Not because I needed to see him again, but because it reminded me of something powerful, that love doesn't always fail. Sometimes it just changes form. The night of the gala, I didn't go. Instead, I made tea, sat by my window, and played track 7 one last time. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the glass. Somewhere across town, Jake was probably on stage, thanking donors, telling his story, doing what he was always meant to, touching hearts, not chasing headlines. And me? I was finally at peace with every version of our story. He'd walked away for fame. But fame, ironically, had taught us both humility. And in some strange, poetic way, it brought us both home. A year after the gala invitation, life had settled into a quiet rhythm I genuinely loved. Mornings started with coffee and journaling instead of scrolling through what other people were doing. I spent weekends volunteering at the same writing center where I'd first rediscovered myself. And sometimes when I passed the old bar where Jake used to play, I'd stop, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Because that's where everything had started. And where, in a strange way, everything had also come full circle. It was a Saturday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hey Sarah, it's Emily, Jake's sister. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. He mentioned you once helped with his early music projects. We're hosting a small event at the foundation next weekend in his honor, and I'd love for you to come if you can. My heart skipped. In his honor? I immediately texted back. Hi Emily, I'm not sure what you mean. Is Jake okay? A few minutes later, her reply came through. He passed away last night. Heart failure. Peacefully in his sleep. I froze. Everything around me blurred. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the sound of kids playing outside. It all faded into a strange, hollow silence. I read her message again and again, like maybe I'd misread it. But I hadn't. Jake was gone. For a long time, I just sat on the floor, staring at the message. The first tear came slow, then the next, and then all of them at once. Not the ugly, hysterical sobs of heartbreak, just quiet tears for someone I once knew better than anyone, who'd burned so brightly and then gone out too soon. He had finally found peace, I told myself. That had to count for something. Melissa came over that night after I called her. She didn't say much, just sat beside me, holding my hand. You don't have to justify the tears, she said softly. Love doesn't disappear just because time passed. I nodded. It's not even sadness, not really. It's everything. It's all the memories collapsing at once. The memorial was small, held at his foundation, the Riverlight Center. The walls were lined with photographs from his recovery journey, his community work, the smiling faces of kids who'd found purpose through music. I recognized a few people from the benefit concert. They hugged me gently, no one asking how I knew him, they just seemed to understand. Emily greeted me with tears and warmth. He talked about you often, she said. He said you were the reason he believed people could change. I smiled faintly, my throat tight. He changed himself, Emily. I just reminded him he could. They played a few of his songs, mostly the later ones, the ones about healing. But when track 7 started, I felt my knees weaken. The same song he'd sent me on that flash drive filled the room. His voice echoed softly through the speakers, rich and raw. People cried quietly. Some held hands. Others just closed their eyes. And me? I smiled through the tears. Because that song wasn't about fame or regret anymore. It was about redemption. About two people who finally learned how to forgive each other and themselves. After the service, I stepped outside. The sun was beginning to set, casting the whole sky in orange and pink. It reminded me of that night years ago, the one where he first knocked on my door, asking for 5 minutes. Only this time, I didn't feel anger or confusion, just calm. I pulled the old Polaroid from my wallet and looked at it again. The two of us laughing, messy, hopeful, naive. I hope you found your peace, I whispered. You earned it. A soft breeze brushed against my cheek, like an answer. In the months that followed, I wrote my second book. Not about him this time, about the idea of love that changes shape, that teaches, that heals. I called it The Sound of Quiet. The dedication page reads simply, for the one who taught me that sometimes love's greatest act isn't holding on, it's letting go. The book became a quiet success, just like the first. But this time, I didn't feel the rush of accomplishment. I felt content, because it wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about honoring the story for what it was. Messy, painful, beautiful, and real. One night, during a book signing, a woman around my age came up to me. She was nervous, holding a copy to her chest. Your books helped me forgive someone I thought I never could, she said. And because of that, I got my life back. I smiled, signing her copy. That's what it's all about. We don't write to relive the pain. We write to make sure it wasn't for nothing. She wiped her eyes. You're stronger than most people I know. I shook my head gently. No. Just someone who finally stopped mistaking endings for failures. When I got home that night, I sat by my window again, tea in hand, watching the city lights. I played track 7 one last time. Jake's voice filled the quiet room like a familiar heartbeat. And as the song ended, I whispered, "Thank you for coming back," just long enough for both of us to say goodbye the right way. I closed my eyes and smiled. Because even though he walked away for fame, and fame once shattered both our worlds, in the end, it also brought him back, not to my door, but to peace. And that, I realized, was the real ending all along.